The morning light found its way through the antique stained glass windows of Château de Lumière, casting fractured rainbows upon polished marble floors. Each pane held a whisper of golden promise, as though the very walls celebrated the union soon to unfold. 200 guests stirred in hushed corridors, sipping espresso and exchanging eager smiles. Above them, crystal chandeliers trembled with the weight of anticipation, while outside, ancient cedar trees bore silent witness. In the rose garden beyond the terrace, dew clung to velvet petals like tiny jewels awaiting discovery. The air was sweet with honeysuckle, and somewhere in the distance, a string quartet tuned its violins. It was a morning forged from every fairy tale dream, and yet, beneath its beauty lay a current of uneasy truth. Angelina Jolie stood before a gilt mirror, ivory silk pooling at her feet like the first snowfall of winter. Her emerald eyes, bright with excitement, betrayed a tremor of doubt that clung to her like a shadow. She lifted the lace veil to inspect the graceful curve of her cheek, steadying her breath. A single tear threatened to spill, but she blinked it away and forced a smile. Behind the mirror, her mother arranged stray strands of hair, humming a lullaby that once soothed a restless child. Each note stirred memories of laughter and whispered dreams. Today was meant to be a monument to triumph, yet the letters in Angelina's trembling hand weighed upon her like iron. She recalled the midnight confession from a mysterious admirer, each line more intoxicating than the last, and she wondered how the fantasy could ever survive the light of day. In the dressing room next door, Brad Pitt adjusted his cufflinks with precision that bordered on mania. The silver gleamed in his shaking palm, reflecting his own conflicted gaze. He had imagined this day countless times, bridesmaids tossing petals, champagne flutes raised in joyous toasts, his bride's hand warm in his own. But these visions had been tainted by a darker revelation. At dawn's first light, he had discovered a hidden microfilm within the golden pendant, an heirloom passed down through generations. It contained proof of Angelina's late-night trysts, each frame a silent indictment of vows unkept. He slid the pendant beneath his waistcoat, fingers numb from its weight, and instructed his best man to retrieve it later by the fountain. He prayed he would never have to use what it held. As the Château's clock tower chimed 10, guests found their seats on satin cushions and turned toward the flower-lined aisle. Brad emerged beneath the arched colonnade in a tuxedo of midnight blue, every inch the picture of composure. Yet, when the hush fell, he felt as though the ground had shifted beneath him. The flower girls scattered rose petals in whispered streams, and the silk tents above fluttered like hopeful hearts. Angelina followed, escorted by her father beneath a canopy of white blossoms. Her train whispered promises of forever, but her gaze flickered to Brad with an unspoken plea. Please, let this be real. He managed a tight smile before glancing away, mind racing with the morning's torment. She took her place beside him, their shoulders brushing, sending an electric current through each arm. He swallowed hard, willing his voice to obey them. She inhaled the scent of jasmine and regret, leaning ever so slightly away. The officiant, a beloved family friend, offered a blessing that sounded distant in Brad's ears. When he asked if anyone opposed the marriage, not a single soul stirred. Yet Brad felt the truth press against his ribs like a living thing. He thought of the therapist who had soothed his sprained ankle with hands far too intimate. He thought of Angelina's hushed laughter on late-night calls, the urgency in her voice. He wondered if they had ever known each other, or only shared illusions. When Angelina's voice trembled with the words, "to love and to cherish," Brad felt his own vow catch in his throat like a stone. He reached for her hand, knowing she carried a different secret in her locket, a single strand of hair tied with black thread. Their hands met, cold and quivering. A gentle breeze stirred the fabric of his suit, as though heaven itself sighed. Cameras clicked like distant thunder. Guests leaned forward, eyes alight with hope and envy in equal measure. The officiant's words, "by the power vested in me," echoed through the hush, and Brad closed his eyes. He saw the future branches above the garden, each blossom a path not yet taken. He saw Angelina's face in profile, the line of her jaw set with determination. He felt his heart fracture between love and fury. Then came his promise, "I do." It slipped from his lips in a whisper, more an act of survival than devotion. Angelina mirrored him, her own vow laced with unspoken longing. In that instant, they became husband and wife, bound by promise, stained by secrets, and poised on the brink of a revelation that would change them forever. The midday sun cast a soft glow over the terrace of Château de Lumière, illuminating the long banquet tables draped in ivory linen. Platters of heirloom tomatoes and burrata glistened beside crystal decanters filled with rosé that caught the light like rose-gold jewels. Servers moved like graceful specters, balancing trays of amuse-bouches that smelled of truffle and spring herbs. Laughter and the clink of glasses drifted through the balustrade arches, mingling with the gentle murmur of the fountains below. Yet beneath the elegance, an undercurrent of tension rippled through the guests, an almost imperceptible tremor, like the faintest quiver of a leaf before a storm. Brad Pitt stood near the head table, his back ramrod straight as he raised his glass to toast a string of anecdotes. Family friends recounted childhood pranks he and Angelina had once played, their voices warm with nostalgia. At each cheerful anecdote, Angelina's laughter chimed like chimes in a summer breeze. But Brad noticed how her eyes flickered toward the rose arbor at the edge of the garden. He found himself following her gaze, the memory of that fragile moment at the altar still raw beneath his skin. He sipped his wine, tasting something metallic and bitter at the back of his throat. Across the terrace, Angelina moved among their guests with effortless grace, her laughter shimmering like a welcome lullaby. Yet when she passed by a cluster of close friends, she offered only a strained smile before glancing behind her, as though expecting someone to emerge from the wisteria-clad arch. Brad watched her drift away, the hem of her gown trailing like a whisper of silk. A prickle of dread crawled along his spine. He set down his flute and excused himself, stepping over the patterned tiles toward the arbor, where the roses had begun to sway in a breeze that carried gossip on its wings. As he approached the carved stone bench entwined with ivy, he saw her, the familiar silhouette framed by white blooms. Angelina's head was bent, her hair cascading in a curtain of ebony. She leaned close to a man whose features were partially obscured by shadows. The curve of his shoulder and the sweep of his neck were achingly recognizable. Brad froze, the world around him dissolving into silence. Petals drifted to the ground in slow motion as he watched the man's hand brush Angelina's cheek. Her lips parted in a tentative smile that should never have been hers to give. "Angelina," he said, voice cracking like fragile glass. She jerked upright, her eyes widening in shock. The man slid away into the labyrinth of hedges, vanishing before Brad could step forward. She pressed her hand to her heart, as though the contact had burned her skin. "Brad, He held up a hand to halt her, eyes stinging with betrayal. "Who is he?" His voice was low, barely above a growl. "Who were you speaking to?" Tears sprang to Angelina's eyes. She met his gaze, fierce yet vulnerable. "It's not what you think," she whispered, though her voice trembled. "Please, let me explain." But Brad felt the hot sting of every secret hidden between them. He recalled the unsigned letters that had arrived in delicate script, detailing the stolen meetings in midnight gardens, meetings she had dismissed with nervous laughter. He thought of his own cowardice, of the comfort he had found in another's bed when his insecurities overwhelmed him. Each memory melded into a maelstrom of guilt and anger. "I thought this day would be about us," he said, voice tight with emotion. "But it's built on every lie we've ever told." Angelina's lip quivered. She stepped closer, reaching out, but he recoiled as though her touch might scorch him. "I love you," she said, the words breaking through her tears. "I never stopped loving you." He looked away, gaze drifting across the fountains where water arced in liquid diamonds. Around them, the reception continued like a play in which they were no longer actors. Bridesmaids lifted their skirts to navigate the gravel. Distant conversations hummed beneath the trellises. Time seemed to hold its breath, the heartbeat of the chateau echoing in Brad's ears. "Love isn't enough," he said at last, voice hollow. "Not if it's stained by deceit." Angelina's tears fell free now, tracing paths down her cheeks. She swallowed hard, steeling herself. "I made a terrible mistake," she confessed, voice trembling yet resolute. "I was scared of losing you, of being alone. He was someone I thought I could trust to listen." Brad's hands curled into fists at his sides. "And I," he admitted through gritted teeth, "found solace with someone else when I felt weak. I never meant to hurt you. In that confession, a trembling bridge formed between them. The cruel symmetry of their betrayals created a mirror of guilt that neither could escape. Angelina reached out again, lower this time, and Brad met her halfway, their fingers entwined, brittle but real. He drew her close, forehead resting against hers. "What do we do now?" he murmured. She closed her eyes, breathing in the scent of jasmine and remorse. "We tell the others the truth," she said quietly. "Together?" Brad nodded, pressing a kiss to her hair before straightening. They stepped back toward the terrace hand in hand, shoulders squared against the bright afternoon. The string quartet struck a tentative chord as guests turned to watch them emerge from the arbor's shadow. Angelina met each gaze with a steady face, and Brad raised his glass in a shaky toast. Laughter and applause bloomed around them, mingling with curious whispers. As they rejoined the celebration, two wounded souls offering their raw confessions to the world, Brad realized that this reception, stained as it was by exposure, might be the first true step toward healing. And as the orchestra swelled, he allowed himself to hope that honesty, however painful, could yet yield a stronger love than any perfection ever could. The clatter of crystal settled into a hush as Brad and Angelina re-emerged from the rose-leaf shadows, their hands still clasped in a fragile solidarity. Guests paused mid-conversation, forks suspended above plates of lavender-infused sorbet, and all eyes turned toward the head table. Brad drew a steadying breath and lifted his glass, gesturing for silence. Angelina straightened her veil with trembling fingers, then stepped forward onto a small dais draped in ivory satin. The late afternoon light gilded her profile as she raised her voice, clear despite the tremor of emotion beneath. "I promised you truth," she began, gaze sweeping across familiar faces. Friends who had cheered their love, family who had watched their every triumph and trial. "And truth we shall have." She swallowed, and Brad moved to her side, offering silent strength. "We confessed our failures," she continued, "not to shame each other, but to free ourselves from the weight of hidden secrets. Today, we choose honesty over illusion." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some guests exchanged uneasy glances, while others nodded, moved by her courage. Brad stepped forward next, his posture straighter, voice steadier than he felt. "I ask you now to witness the next step in our journey," he said, lifting from his pocket two small velvet boxes. "These are not new rings, but symbols of renewal. May they remind us that even cracked foundations can bear new strength when built with honesty and love." He opened one box to reveal a simple band of hammered gold. Angelina opened the other to reveal a matching ring. Together, they exchanged rings once more, this time in full view of their community, sealing a vow rooted not in perfection, but in the shared resolve to rebuild. Applause blossomed like spring flowers, tentative at first, then swelling into genuine acclaim. After the ceremony, family members approached in gentle clusters. Angelina's mother embraced her, offering a soft whisper. "True love braves the storm." Her father, eyes glassy, placed a hand on Brad's shoulder. "You two have always been stronger together," he said. Across the table, Brad's sister raised a tumbler of iced tea in a mock toast. "To honesty," she declared, "and to whatever comes next." Laughter rippled through the group, warm, forgiving, and entirely human. Seeking refuge from the swirl of congratulations, Brad led Angelina through a side door into the Château's private salon. Rich tapestries muffled the distant strains of the quartet, and the firelight cast shifting shadows across polished oak floors. They sank onto a velvet settee, hands still entwined, and allowed themselves a moment of quiet. Angelina laid her head against Brad's shoulder. "I thought revealing everything would ruin us," she confessed. "But it has given me something I never knew I craved, real trust." Brad brushed a lock of hair from her brow. "I was terrified you'd leave," he admitted. "Yet here you are, still with me." He paused, searching her eyes. "Let's promise to speak first, before doubt drives us apart again." She nodded, lifting her face for a soft kiss. In that breath, they forged an unspoken covenant, to guard their love with vulnerability rather than secrecy. As twilight deepened, music drifted through the open French windows, and they returned to the terrace. The string quartet played a tender nocturne, and guests formed a circle around the newly united couple. Brad offered his hand to Angelina, and she placed her other hand in his. With hesitant steps, then surer ones, they began their first dance under lantern-strewn vines. Their movements were unpolished. He faltered once. She laughed to steady him, but each misstep only drew them closer. Around them, friends joined hands, weaving into a living wreath of support and celebration. Above, the chateau's towers gleamed against the sapphire sky. In that circle of light and music, Brad and Angelina felt the fractures of the day mending, stitch by careful stitch. When the final note lingered in the night air, they shared a look of quiet triumph, a recognition that what they had survived was more real and more precious than any pristine fantasy. Hand in hand, they stepped from the dancer's embrace, ready to face whatever dawn might bring. Night had fully claimed Château de Lumière, and the grounds glowed under the soft luminescence of lanterns and moonlight. The air was cool with the scent of night-blooming jasmine and damp earth, lending the garden a mysterious hush. Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, newly re-wedded in truth, walked hand in hand along the gravel path that wound past fountain basins carved with mythic figures. Above them, the towers of the chateau stood sentinel, their windows flickering with candlelight. As they paused beneath an ancient oak, Angelina traced the rough bark with her fingertips, as though seeking reassurance in its steadfast presence. "I never imagined our wedding night would feel like a beginning and an end at once," Angelina whispered, resting her head against Brad's shoulder. He tightened his grip around her hand, drawing her closer. "Endings can be beautiful if they reveal what must be left behind," he replied, voice low enough only for her to hear. "And beginnings worth having are forged in honesty." They wandered further, the snap of gravel underfoot echoing in the stillness. In the distance, the string quartet had resumed a quiet serenade, its notes drifting across the gardens. Lanterns floated on the surface of the reflecting pool, glimmering like fallen stars. Here, away from the guests, they confronted the truth of their new bond, the fragile weaving of forgiveness and the steady loom of renewed commitment. Angelina paused beside the pool's edge, peering at her reflection, fractured by ripples. "Do you think we can really move forward?" she asked, eyes searching the trembling reflection. Brad knelt beside her, reaching into his waistcoat pocket. He withdrew the golden pendant that had once held evidence of her betrayal, its clasp now empty. Slowly, he dropped it into the water. The pendant sank, glinting as it passed beneath the lantern light, and then disappeared into the dark. "I choose to let go," he said, "but only because I know you've done the same." A breeze stirred, carrying with it the strains of violin strings and muffled laughter from the reception tents. They stood, and Brad drew Angelina to dance once more. No audience, no script, only two souls moving together in the pale glow. Their steps were hesitant at first, but as the music wrapped around them, they found a new rhythm built on mutual trust. Brad spun Angelina gently beneath a hanging lantern, her laughter breaking free like a bird released. In that moment, each lost fragment of doubt fell away, replaced by the quiet certainty that even broken vows could be mended. When the final notes faded, they remained locked in a soft embrace. Angelina lifted her face, and Brad brushed a stray lock of hair from her brow. "Promise me something," she said, "that we will always speak our truth, no matter how painful." He met her gaze, the moonlight reflecting in his eyes. "I promise," he answered, "and I vow to listen, truly listen, whenever you speak yours." They strolled back toward the chateau, passing under canopies of wisteria that dripped like purple rain. Candles flickered on windowsills, casting dancing silhouettes against pale walls. Inside, the grand salon remained alive with soft conversation, the final guests gathering for a last embrace of celebration. Family and friends approached, drawn to the glow of unity that now surrounded the couple. Each congratulated them, not on a perfect wedding, but on the courage they had shown in forging a love stronger than deceit. Angelina's younger brother lifted a glass in salute. "To the bravest bride and groom I've ever known," he toasted. Brad raised his glass in return. "And to the family who stood by us," he said. The assembled guests echoed their toast, voices ringing with warmth and acceptance. In those smiles, Brad and Angelina saw the promise of a life beyond the chateau's walls, one where imperfection was honored and honesty celebrated. Later, when the last lanterns were dimmed and the final carriages rolled away, Brad and Angelina found themselves alone once more in the deserted ballroom. Moonlight filtered through the tall windows, illuminating swirling motes of dust like constellations come to Earth. They moved to the center of the room and danced slowly, the silence their only accompaniment. Each step was a testament to the night's revelations, a vow renewed in each measured turn. At last, they paused beneath the grand crystal chandelier, its prisms scattered across their faces like scattered promises made whole again. Angelina reached up to touch the chandelier's lowest prism, then let her hand fall into Brad's. "Whatever comes next," she said, her voice firm, "we face it together." He smiled, a gentle curving of lips that spoke of relief and hope. "Together," he echoed, sealing their pact in the quiet stillness. As dawn approached, they ascended the sweeping marble staircase to their suite. The rooms, once empty and waiting, now held the weight of their shared confessions. Brad looked at the canopy bed draped in sheer curtains and turned to Angelina. "Shall we rest?" he asked. She nodded, stepping inside to draw back the linens. He joined her, and they lay side by side, hands entwined, gazing at the painted ceiling where cherubs danced among clouds. In the hush before sleep claimed them, Angelina whispered, "Thank you for staying." Brad pressed a kiss to her temple. "Thank you for trusting me with your truth." Their breaths slowed, harmonizing in the darkness. Outside, the chateau's ancient stones stood quiet, as if conspired to guard their secret. And in that peace, two hearts, tested by betrayal and forgiveness, found their way to rest in a love remade by honesty.